for our concluding session, we're going to have reflections from 4 people as listed in the programme, but I'm going to take them in the reverse order to the order in which they're listed, just to cause confusion. So we're going to hear from Ed Fottrell first, then Patti Koskova, then Alain Lebric, and finally from Dr. Cassetti. So, but Ed, I know, is going to just briefly present the feedback from the survey material, and he's got a couple of slides to do that with. So I'm going to ask Ed to do that before I invite the others up onto the platform, because they'll want to see the slides, I guess.
Thank you, Peter. I will only take a couple of minutes. Yesterday, thinking we had a tech-savvy, geeky mHealth audience, we sent you an electronic survey yesterday to get your views on where you'd like to go from this conference. There were 150 people here yesterday. We had 37 people who were here yesterday responded, and 8 of our online audience. We had 91 people watching yesterday online, which was quite good, but 45 responses. It's about less than 30%, so quite shameful, but you'll have a chance to redeem yourselves, because you're all going to get another survey at the end of this conference to evaluate. So I just briefly want to go through some of this, and not surprisingly, most of the people who responded do work somehow with mHealth. Someone's not sure.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
With a microphone, preferably.
Just curious about the don't knows.
I think it's probably one person. Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa dominating, also South Asia, but quite a mix. You can see that we have got a good representation of the globe. This is the online audience only. You can see that most of those who were online are working somehow in Sub-Saharan Africa, a bit in South Asia. They asked whether a global network of researchers and practitioners in mHealth is something that people would be interested in joining, and there's generally a big consensus there. Obviously, we've got quite a select sample here, and people are going to be interested anyhow, but that's a good sign that there's a willingness to continue this dialogue. There's obviously a interest and recognition that all of our work could benefit from various things, and one of the most popular things actually was this mHealth blog series, perhaps where we can all contribute together, sharing ideas, sharing innovation and thoughts. And most of us would be willing to contribute to that. Asking whether this should be run again, most people thought yes, and annually. One person thought never again, but I was feeling a bit negative, probably. And yeah, people would come back to London and have another conference. We've set up a website, a Tumblr site, based on this conference, but really as somewhere, again, to start doing this, to start having this dialogue, to start sharing our resources and our ideas together. So I encourage you to go and have a look at that, and I very much encourage you to improve on your response rate for the next survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. So the question really is, what next? And you're just 3 not very random representatives, but nevertheless 3 representatives from the meeting, just to offer us some thoughts in conclusion about maybe partly what we've learned, but also what the implications might be for the future. So Patti, I'll start with you, if that's okay.
Okay, so I'm kind of a funny beast here. I'm a computer scientist by training, but working in digital health in Europe and also in various parts of Africa. I think as we all came here, we all believe that a major opportunity has arisen for improving health in the continent in low-income settings through technology. And I think it's amazing to see that Africa is an example of continent skipping the broadband generation and straight going to the mobile with impressive coverage, over 90% in most parts of Africa. So I think the reason we all came here and we want to come clearly annually here is because we all believe this can revolutionize the way health is delivered on the continent, where I think it is needed most. From the technical perspective and from a number of projects I worked in East Africa and South Africa, the main concern, we believe, is no attention is given to a long-term sustainability of the technical solutions. So I think for any planning of a deployment of mHealth solutions, all the issues we've discussed all come together. But I think on the technological side, there is still a lack of understanding that it's not just the final product which gets produced throughout your project funding, it's implemented, evaluated, and it's not going to run forever on its own. And this is not just typical for Africa. I think everywhere the kind of understanding of IT billing something you pay for, you deliver, and then that's it. I think it is causing a major dissatisfaction because of the need to maintain, improve, and develop new enhanced versions as your product on a local or national, regional settings is being developed. So I think thinking forward and being able to think about the technical sustainability, the technical maintenance, the improvements, understanding the user needs as they are using it, not just at the beginning when you do your pilot and we roll out the solutions, how it evolves over 3, 5, and 10 years. I think this all needs to be brought into the kind of long-term planning for mHealth solutions to actually make sure they meet the local need and are long-term sustainable. So I think that's my main concern.
Thank you very much. Alain.
Thanks. So I wanted to start with some lessons learned that I think it's just been such an honor to hear from some really distinguished members of the various panels and from real leaders in government who have set the standard for how other countries who have yet not adopted a lot of these innovations can follow suit. So I think it's been a really enlightening couple of days. I come back to the point of mHealth not being monolithic because it's a conversation that we've been having over and over again in the US side of this conversation and in South Asia and in conversations in Africa. And I think it's important that really be central to our thinking about this. Focusing on solving the health constraints or the problems that are plaguing the health systems that we work with is really central to what we need to be doing and not generating shiny new widgets that we go to governments with. The mHealth evidence ecosystem is growing, and there are many of us in the room and colleagues who have been central to growing that foundational aspect of this space. The questions that we asked over the course of these 2 days, whether there is an evidence base for this or that in mHealth, will gradually go away as that evidence base grows. We do need to improve some of our best practices and the knowledge about what constitute best practices. All the way from, as you just mentioned, participatory design. Where are the guidelines for mHealth developers to what that entails? How to go about doing solid, robust participatory design, end user engagement, and stakeholder identification from the district level all the way up to national ministries. We've heard over and over government engagement is critical, so that's certainly one piece of this formula. But we haven't talked about stickiness, and this is something that we hear a lot in this space, especially in the user-centered design world. We've seen with applications and things that people download from the App Store, there's a quick turnaround to using something for a few days and then you never touch it again. Giving a frontline health worker a tool and expecting them to use that for months on end, we have the opportunity to make it engaging, to make these things well designed, and even, I'll use the F word, fun. Right? I mean, we have the opportunity to introduce gamification, friendly competition, things that might improve the way frontline health workers go about the rote processes of their daily work, and there may be incentives to build into that. In terms of the future directions that I think we have in front of us, I think we're going to see more and more countries having national E and mHealth strategies and the formation of technical bodies. We've seen this in South Africa, we've seen it in East Africa. I'm sure there's a national technical body that includes not just government, but NGO and private sector experts working in this space. we're going to see stronger guidance from normative agencies. UNICEF, WHO, the European Union will start to release some guidance along this space of the questions we had from Dr. Patel and others in the morning. We also need those clearer roadmaps for scale. We don't know specifically all of the accessory components to scaling an mHealth solution. When you go from 100 phones to 100,000 phones, there's an entire ecosystem that has to be built around supporting those phones and that architecture. So I think we need to understand what that is. And I think mainstream health innovators are going to be doing mHealth without calling it mHealth. In the very short future, it's going to be harder for us to do meta-analyses of mHealth because it's not all going to be tagged with the word mHealth just because someone uses a phone as part of a process. I think we're going to see more CRVS initiatives using mobile tools, the routine vital surveillance systems that there's a lot of investment around. But we will continue to see pilots, and they are not necessarily a bad thing. We will see pilots, and we will see enterprise-grade mHealth. National program, and as His Excellency said, integrational programs where ministries of health say, we want a system that doesn't just do MNCH, we want a system that does MNCH, malaria, TB, etc. And so that diversity will be required. And then I think we're on the verge of seeing crossover new technologies, sensors, microdiagnostics, point-of-care diagnostics that are currently emergent in the developed world begin to make their way into the developing world. And we're engaged in programs looking at early neonatal distress sensors for rural India, something I wouldn't have dreamt possible 5 years ago, but here we are. So there's a lot happening, there's a lot of stuff to work on, but I'm very optimistic.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think that's a very helpful overview of at least where we might be going as far as any of us know. Dr. Cassetti, from your perspective, where are we going?
I think mHealth will be the future of healthcare in Africa, no question about it. If I take my country, Ethiopia, with its, vast land mass, and with a growing coverage of mobile phones and the connectivity with mobiles, and with a growing number of Chinese smartphone assembling plants coming to Addis, the penetration of smartphones will also grow. So it is going to provide us huge opportunities to improve access to information and to improve referral. Some of the things that I mentioned yesterday, from data exchange up to training of health workers and so on. So mHealth will be, an important platform, an important tool to improve health sector performance in Ethiopia. This is how I see it. Going forward, there are some things I would like to see globally as well as in my country. Globally, WHO as a normative, agency needs to continue developing important standards and guidances regarding mHealth. I know that they have started to work on that, and Garrett was mentioning that yesterday. But WHO has to play a very important role in terms of doing this. Second, when you look at some programs, like neglected tropical diseases or NCDs and so on, WHO always comes up with roadmaps and the best buys and so on. So it is important to think on that line as well. As countries, we look at WHO as a technical agency that will, as a reputable institution where you can really look at, the best buys and the technical things that needs to be put in place. So I call upon, WHO, other academia and so on to work together and put all these important best buys that countries can look at and say, can we do this best practice in our setting? Can we do it and see whether it will also be good enough to improve health and well-being. The third, based on these global master plans and guidances and best buys, it is important to improve national strategies. I mean, in my country, we have a national e-health strategy, which has mHealth as a subset of that strategy. And we have a clearer view of what type of, digital enterprise we are going to have in the health sector. So we make it a requirement that whatever is going to be piloted, tested, and so on has to, from the outset, be interoperable with this bigger enterprise that we want to scale up throughout the country. So it is important to work with countries like ours in developing good national e-health strategies and plans. And the last one is, for donors, it is important to work with national governments in designing, pilot projects and so on. I mean, what often happens, I'm not trying to be, hypercritical about this issue, but what often happens is, a prescription is made elsewhere and say, well, HIV programs all over the world have similar problems in terms of adherence, in terms of supply, in terms of whatever. And let's come up with an mHealth solution to solve this. And something that is designed at the global level cannot be tested in every country. It has to be contextualized. It has to be looked at from a broader kind of perspective. And I think it is the responsibility of countries as well as donor institutions to make sure that there is good return on the investment, how little it may seem when it comes to specific projects, but we have to really think in that perspective as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think some very important points there. It remains with me, I think, now to thank everybody. I'm not going to thank every individual participant by name, but I do have a few in mind, I have to say. It's been a fascinating experience collaborating with UCL to arrange this whole meeting and to make it happen. And everybody, I think, that I've spoken to who's been here on the premises yesterday and today has been positive about it. A lot of people have given me a lot of positive feedback. It may be that nobody's quite brave enough to come and say this to my face that this is a rubbish meeting, but my sort of instinct is that people have found it useful and interesting. The whole thing would not have happened at all if it hadn't been for a huge amount of behind-the-scenes activity. Helen Hopkins, for example, I don't know whether she's here, but she's probably behind the scenes. But she has put an enormous amount of work into actually making this happen. And I think many of you will have had contact with her in terms of the arrangements and so on, and she has done fantastically well. So, yeah, she's not here, I think, but please, Anthony, will you convey that to her when you see her? Equally, there are other people around her, Kate, Faye, Mary, probably some others whose names I don't even know, who I know have also been engaged on various aspects of it. My colleagues in the organising group also hugely essential to making the whole thing happening. It does say on the back, conference planning team, Ed, Helen, Prue, Delia, Anthony, and I think there were a few others besides Sophia, and I don't know, it gets dangerous, doesn't it, when you start listing people by name, but I know there have been a whole lot of people who've really spent a lot of effort, joined a lot of teleconferences and so on to make it happen. So we're hugely grateful on behalf of all of us to all of these people who have made that happen. But of course, a conference would also be extremely boring and uninteresting if it were not for the actual content and the contribution both of people who are presenting and the feedback and contribution from people who are here in person, and also from people who are online, and there have been good numbers of both, and you can see behind me a continuing interest in the Twitter feed that's coming up both from in the room and from elsewhere. That's, I think, a great testament to the interest and the enthusiasm that there is in this whole field. So in thanking our speakers and our participants, I want to just single out in particular our two keynote speakers. Alain this morning gave us a really masterful, I was going to say overview, but I'm going to say performance actually, Alain. It was really a good performance of the whole field. It was great, and it was skillfully delivered. The content was absolutely up to the minute in terms of the subject matter, and I think everybody was inspired by it, so thank you very much. And last and absolutely not least, I want to thank Dr. Cassetti for being here. He's contributed a whole lot in terms of his keynote that he gave us such an inspiring start with yesterday. That was great, and he's contributed so much as well to the various panels and discussions and activities that have been going on. Over the years, I was reflecting last night, I've been to a lot of conferences that have involved ministers, some conferences even that have involved heads of state. But this is the first one that I've ever been to where a minister was here at the beginning and stayed here continuously through to the end. So we're really grateful to you, not just for being here, but for your depth of insight and knowledge, and for taking the time and having the interest to share in these important debates. So I think that is pretty much it. Yes? Anthony's giving me a nod there. So, sorry, one point that Ed told me to mention that I've forgotten. If you, for whatever reason, find it helpful to have a certificate of attendance to say that you've been here, those certificates are available outside as you leave. That might be important for some people. Alan, you want to?
I just wanted to add something to Ed's comment earlier. I would welcome every single person who's here, both digitally and in person, to participate in the mHealth working group, which remains the most robust community of mHealth innovators and researchers, over almost 2,000 members now from 70 different countries. And I think it would really be a great benefit to have those of you who aren't members to join the working group. And it continues to grow in its mission and coverage of the globe. But there are also very rich discussion groups. I look at Hamish here with the GHD online forum that they manage and maintain, ICT for CHW, ICT for D. There's some very active communities, which I would recommend those of you who aren't part of those communities join. But lastly, I don't think we've had a round of applause for you, Peter, and for Anthony and Ed. And I think that if others would humor me in my Americanness, we'd like to applaud you for that.